Sabrosura pa' ti que
Hello, everyone. This is Pam, de Café con Pam, the bilingual podcast that features Latine and people of the global majority who break barriers, change lives, and make this world a better place. Welcome to episode 376 of Café con Pam. Today, we have a conversation with Elaine Lin Hering. Elaine is a facilitator, a writer, and a speaker. She works with organizations and individuals to build skills in communication, collaboration, and conflict management. She's worked on 6 continents and facilitated executive education at Harvard, Dartmouth, Tufts, UC Berkeley, and UCLA. She is the former advanced training director for the Harvard Mediation Program and a lecturer on law at Harvard Law School. She's worked with coal miners at BHP Billiton, microfinance organizers in East Africa, mental health professionals in China, and senior leadership at the U.S. Department of Commerce. Elaine is the author of the USA Today best-selling book, Unlearning Silence: How to Speak Your Mind, Unleash Talent, and Live More Fully. Listeners, this conversation with Elaine was so lovely. It's one that I think we needed more time to fully dive into it. I feel like we barely scratched the surface. And of course, the essence of Cafe Con Pam is to explore our guest story and then, weave the story from there. And I think I almost want to bring Elaine back and like do a deep dive into the book, frankly, because in this episode, I wanted to talk about her story and how things came about. But I think the book truly, you'll hear me say this in the episode, the book that she wrote is one that it needs to be discussed. It's one that that evokes a lot of conversation and a lot of kind of like, I don't know what I'm doing with my hands, but like delayering or like peeling, I guess is the word that I'm looking for. So I really enjoyed my conversation with Elaine. I hope you do as well. Y sin más, here's my conversation with Elaine Lin Hering.
Sabrosura pa' ti que
Elaine, welcome to Café con Pam.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for your work and for being here.
Mm.
So, the first question that we always ask is, what is your heritage?
Mhm. That shouldn't be a complicated question,
Yeah, it is.
but it is.
Yes.
So let's just acknowledge that. I was born in Taipei, Taiwan.
Okay.
And there's a long pause there because I am still working it out. Right? I grew up identifying as Chinese American. And then as I was teaching and speaking, I identified as Chinese American. I would mention that I was born in Taipei. And people would come up to me saying, no, you're not Chinese American, you're Taiwanese American. I was like, I went to Mandarin school, and the first lesson was 我是中国人, was a 海外的中国人, meaning I am a Chinese person, I'm an overseas Chinese person. That was literally lesson number 1.
Wow.
Is that indoctrination? Is that... So I'm still working it out, but we can go factual of I was born in Taipei, Taiwan, and I immigrated to the States when I was 10 months old. And I'm Asian American.
The Asian American experience.
That's what I got.
Love it. And so where are your parents from?
My parents were also born in Taiwan.
Okay.
And why is any of this politicized? Because it so is.
Totally.
And I actually ended up raising the conversation with my parents, being like, how do you identify? Because for so long, I identified as Chinese. I thought you did too. And they have evolved and they now identify as Taiwanese American. I was like, oh, well, shoot. What am I supposed to do with that? So I am fully embracing, I can own Asian American and I am letting myself be in the messy middle of I don't have to have it all figured out
Mm-hmm.
of the things I'm juggling, not the highest priority right now. So they also were born in Taiwan.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
And I think for me as a Latina, I feel like, to your point of like our identity is politicized,
Mm.
is it that for Asian Americans is a little bit less, or maybe it's not something that's such a questionable thing like it is for, because the border, because Latinos are like how we present because of so many ways? Or is it because it's not in my radar? I don't know.
It's like, what, why does it matter so much to you?
Yes,
What's the real question behind the question? Are you just trying to fit me into your mental model of how people slot? And this is actually about your discomfort of not being able to identify where I'm from or who I am. And then the politicization is Taiwan a sovereign country? Is it part of China? Pros, cons,
mm,
political parties.
perspectives.
Does it really impact my day to day? No, because people perceive me as an Asian woman in America with all the stereotypes that come with that.
For sure. So you grew up here
I
in the
grew up here,
US the whole time.
California.
Did you ever go back to whether Taiwan or China?
It's funny. I've lived in Beijing, lived
Okay.
there. I have spent more time in Beijing than I have in Taiwan. I have
Yes.
visited family in Taiwan. We're going back next year. I'm taking my biracial son and white husband with me, who have never been.
Okay.
All of it, right? I grew up in California. Everyone told me I was an East Coast girl. I didn't quite understand what that meant until I moved to Boston to go to law school. And I think what they meant by you're an East Coast girl is you're uptight and type A.
Oh, how funny. Like you don't fit the California model,
No.
which is another like checkbox,
Where do I fit then?
right?
When are you actually enough? Never.
Yes.
So I'm just going to stop trying to fit into your interpretations of who I am, what I should be, and why don't I just be me?
Totally. Ooh, so good. So you're in California. How old were you when you started this? Because here's the thing. If this conversation happened anywhere else in the world, we wouldn't have the conversation of heritage
Because
because it doesn't matter elsewhere.
as much.
Yeah, I mean, there's other things. Like for me, as I grew up in Mexico City,
Yeah.
it's less about who and where I come from and more about what do I have and what's my family origin and what privileges is that. It's classism.
It's a different ism.
It's a different ism, but an ism nonetheless.
Yeah. Right. And then do we have a hierarchy of isms? I'm
Right.
sitting with that because the other place that I have lived for a year was Melbourne, Australia, and lots of immigration from different pockets of the world, right? So more Malaysians than I've ever met.
Mm.
And there's a classism there. But yes, I mean, California and the United States, particularly at this point in time, ever more so. And I don't know how you feel about this. There are only a handful of places in this country that I can live.
Oh, 100%.
Mm-hmm.
I went to college in the Midwest, so I'm curious about your experience. And
Where in the Midwest?
in Missouri. And uh, I
Oh,
know. As a California, I'm in San
yeah.
Diego. As a California, we talk often about the all the isms and the
Mhm.
systems and existing in the silos and all of the stuff. And I would say that I think we do because we can. Because when I was in the
Mm.
middle of the country, I was such an anomaly for lack of a better term,
Uh-huh.
that I couldn't talk about it because it was just me.
Mhm.
It was more
Mm.
like, how am I going to deal with the questioning and
Yeah.
the looks
Yep.
and,
Oh,
I
the
mean,
looks.
silence.
Yes. The looks. And the like, what are you?
Hmm.
Right? Because I don't know what to do with, and I'm just like, I'm a human being.
Right.
Is there more or less melanin in my skin?
Yes.
My sister-in-law is adopted from India into a white family in Minnesota. I showed up at her wedding. She and I were two of the only three non-white people at this rural Minnesotan wedding. The wedding photographer, when it came time to do family portraits, was like, who goes with whom? I don't understand.
Wow.
And are you sisters? And I'm like, you're
Wow.
brown. I'm not. But I guess if we're doing the like, who doesn't fit with the rest, we go to what?
Right.
Hmm.
It is a lot. It is
It's a
in
lot.
so where I was going with that is that the my experience in the Midwest was I truly got to live America. And so I wonder how was it for you, and I quote that obviously,
Mm-hmm.
to go from California to the East Coast.
Yeah.
And and I laugh, but it's not laughable. It's like, what?
Mm-hmm.
The
Mm-hmm.
like you're an East Coast girl and finally you got to the East Coast.
Mm-hmm.
How was that for you?
I realized that I think you were telling me that I was uptight. I
Mm.
wasn't chill enough for California.
Even though you're true and true Californian.
Thank you for honoring. I think I'm a Californian.
Yes.
There are lots of people in the state who are not willing to give me that title and acceptance yet. And it's this like, prove it.
Mm.
It's funny because my East Coast experience started out at Harvard Law School, which is such a microcosm. I mean, it's its
Mm-hmm.
own thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I found my people there, those of us who were first gen, who were like the odd ones out, who are not legacy kids.
Yeah.
We found each other, you know, woman from Iowa, woman from Georgia, white. We bound together because we didn't fit. We didn't wear J. Crew or
The uniform.
vacation at the vineyard
Mm.
or the island.
Yeah. Why law? Let's backtrack a little.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Where did that come from?
It came from my mother making an observation that I would make a living by talking. It came from an observation when I was 11 that if you understood the law, you spoke a different language. So I was working
Ooh.
with a nonprofit at the time who was having contract disputes with the government entity. And if you understood the law, you could influence things for good. So I had it in my head to become a lawyer. I didn't know what that meant day to day in terms
Mm-hmm.
of legal practice and had a taste of it as a summer associate, found that it was deadening to my soul. Meanwhile, I had come across negotiation theory and practice at the law school and had this aha moment of wait, you can talk about things? That's not what happened in my family of origin. We swept everything under the rug, and as long as it looked fine, then it was okay. Emotions are okay, they're data. That was not true in my family of origin. So it was a very expensive lesson
Mm.
to learn for myself how do you communicate more effectively, and had the opportunity to be a teaching assistant. I mean, I basically threw myself into that world being like, what else can I learn? Because this is a skill set that I clearly didn't learn growing up. And that seems pretty important if you're going to interact with other human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a hypothesis that I might be good at this. I didn't know it was called leadership development. I mean, that wasn't one of the options of doctor, lawyer, engineer, right?
Right.
As a good immigrant kid does.
It's not on the list.
Yeah, maybe law was closest to,
Yeah.
I wasn't good at science and math. So, but I had a hypothesis that I could be good at this. helping other people learn how to communicate. And I was also told you can't be in this industry unless you have a head of gray hair, 10 years of experience, and basically are a white man.
Pale, male, and stale.
You said it. So I resigned myself to that I would go work at a law firm and pay off school and then figure it out, maybe teach adjunct, find my way back into it. But I got an email saying you're shortlisted for a job in Australia. Let us know if you're interested. And this was a Harvard connection. We interviewed by Skype because Zoom didn't yet exist.
Remember Skype?
Remember Skype? The dial-up
Yes.
tone.
Oh my gosh. that brings so much PTSD.
I'm sorry.
I think everyone our age feels that, like, ooh, and my mom is going to pick up the phone.
It was a way better deal if you're calling out of country, right?
Totally.
Yeah, so I went to Australia to teach at negotiation and mediation at Monash Law School and do consulting in the Asia Pac region, which when you're in your 20s is amazing because the client pays for the travel and you stay the weekend, you go to the beach and got to explore. And the hypothesis proved true, which was I was good at this. I could make a living at this and I liked it. And so never ended up making it to the law firm because there was this other thing I could do that would pay the bills and didn't kill my soul.
So we're going to weave into some of the backstory of this. Making it to Harvard, did you feel, I don't like to use the word imposter, but did you feel like you mentioned, you're not staying at the Hamptons or come from, like, I often talk to I'm also a first gen in the US graduate. And, talking to people about like the tutors that they had before or, like,
What?
tutor what?
Yeah.
Did you ever feel, because you mentioned your group of friends because you didn't fit in, but how did you overcome and how did you unsilence yourself there? How was young Elaine?
I was still pretty silent there. Right? I was silent and I did not see things very clearly. I did not notice that every senior faculty member in the Harvard Law Negotiation teaching program was white. I didn't notice because their teaching assistants, like me, were not white. So when you look at the teaching team as a composite, it's pretty diverse.
There's a sprinkle of diversity.
Yeah, but I did not see at the time the power difference until I became the first Asian or Asian American, Chinese, Taiwanese, whatever you want to call me, senior faculty member years later until I was appointed on faculty. And I was like, I can't possibly, right? This program has existed 30, 35 years. I can't possibly be the first Asian or Asian American senior faculty member, right? With the faculty appointment.
Yeah.
To which the person that I checked that with said, oh, there was Claudia Hernandez in the 80s. And I was like, Claudia Hernandez doesn't sound, I could be judging incorrectly. Doesn't sound Asian to me.
Could be Filipino, but we don't know.
But maybe you're like clumping us all together because we're the non-white.
Yes.
I didn't feel imposter syndrome, though, that I recall. In part because I finally felt like I fit in. We were these nerdy people who were overachievers, who cared a lot about things, who had decided to study this obtuse thing. And there were enough of us who I think we're all sort of misfits in college or in our hometowns that found our way there, that really did feel like a beautiful, sort of when you think about academic freedom and the ideals of debate, it's like we all came together from different parts of the world or the country.
For sure.
So I think I just played in my own lane, where I'm forever grateful that there was a networking dinner where they taught us which fork to use, right? BMW, meaning bread, meal, water, of where the things are supposed to go. So I could at least try to pretend that I knew what I was doing in interviews. but I sort of found my own world, and there was enough, there are people who are interested in criminal law, and there are people who are interested in communication and ADR, and we nerded out there. And so not sure I thought much about the other stuff. It was just like, oh, those are those people, and I have my people, and it's like high school or preschool all over again. So let's do our own thing.
Let's make some friends.
Let's make some friends. Yeah.
What did your parents say when you said, I'm studying law? Like, not a doctor, not a scientist, not an engineer.
Yeah, they were pro that. It's a clearly defined career path.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Were there expectations? Were they strict?
No. I mean, this is the thing, Pam. I remember maybe that book, like Tiger Mom. I forget.
Yes.
Okay. I forget the full title. I didn't have a tiger mom. I didn't have tiger parents. I had parents who said, get a B or a C, go to sleep. This is ridiculous. And I was like, I have to get at 5 a.m. and like finish this. And the perfectionist. So my parents did a phenomenal job of trying to temper that. It's also coupled with, and I'm not sure where this came from, the like, my parents sacrificed to be here. And so I need to honor that. That was very clear, but I don't think it came from them. Either I intuited or I got it from the community at large, or I saw how hard they worked and wanted to make good on it. But in terms of what they said, and I think probably in their heart of hearts, it was, you need to work hard and do your best. But they just wanted us to be sure to have a skill set that could pay our bills.
Mm-hmm. Do you have siblings?
I do. I have an older brother who is an engineer. I'm the youngest.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So he already did that. Check.
Right. He had that covered. So I wonder, I do a lot of inner child work. And so I'm always asking people about their like childhood.
Oof.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It informs a lot of our thinking. So, and I've talked to other Asian Americans about this, and I wonder what's your experience of the model minority, of this like potential like expectation that you need to be good in school. And even like I heard you mention, I wasn't good at math, and because is that the expectation?
Yeah. I was very much, and I say this in the book, the model minority myth incarnate. Like, I was that girl that the other kids my age hated because the aunties would say, why can't you be more like Elaine? I know. I know. And I've now done some relational repair and like had those conversations. And it's deep, right? It's I got to make good on my parents' sacrifice. I think I checked enough of the boxes that the inner work for me actually was, is this who I actually am? Or am I just showing up to be who I think I'm supposed to be?
Ooh.
And then the like, no, actually, I think I am this.
Right.
What does that say about me? Then I was also way overly responsible. So I did a lot of reverse parenting growing up. Like, how do I take care of my family? I was the youngest, but
it sounds like you're the oldest youngest. Have you heard of that term?
Oh, yeah. I have not heard that term, but that totally resonates. Yes.
Yeah. So the youngest families that have the oldest son, but the youngest daughter, the daughter becomes the youngest oldest. I'm the eldest daughter.
Okay.
Which means I'm the eldest.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if my brother is the youngest. So if it had been flipped and like you became the oldest youngest.
I was the oldest youngest. I am still the oldest youngest, but not as badly as before. Meaning, have had the conversations
well, you have your own
with my
family
brother
now.
I do. I play a lot of roles in that. But I had the conversation with my brother because in Mandarin, there's actually different words for oldest brother or older brother and younger brother. And I would always call him older brother, Guka, in Mandarin. And he never called me younger sister, Mimi. He just called me Elaine. And I was like, dude, where were you when I needed like a protective older brother to show up for me and like fight for me? And he's like, I didn't have to do that because you always could take care of yourself.
Oh my gosh.
Just because you can take care of yourself doesn't mean you don't want someone to sometimes take care of you.
Totally. Yeah.
So he's worked on it.
Well, I'm glad.
And I'm glad to be able to have those conversations, right?
Totally.
To be able to laugh about it now and be like, okay, well,
That little
yeah,
inner child.
still wants to be loved.
And I wonder if that was compensation of being so good in school and so doing your homework and so like kind of, I don't know, I can't think of another word, but like obsessing in school, or just like making sure your school role was very taken care of because that was your way of taking care of yourself.
I don't know if it was my way of taking care of myself. I think it was my way of not being problematic for my parents. Right? So like, don't take up space.
Protecting them. Yes.
Yeah, don't make it any harder than it already is. You can at least inject ease here.
Wow. I mean, that's very much the youngest, oldest daughter role of like, if you're not going to make things better, just don't make them worse. You know?
Yeah. And then remind your brother to call home because that will make mom happy.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a good time to take a coffee break. We're getting deep. We're getting so deep.
Sabrosura pa' ti que que.
Okay, so Elaine, do you drink coffee?
I do.
How do you drink your coffee?
You know, I was a drink it black for a long time, and now it's with a splash of milk.
Well, you lived in Australia.
I did. I learned how to order coffee there.
I want to know your Australian experience, because every Australian, I have an Australian friend, and he's like, you haven't had coffee until you've been to Australia. So
I have Australian friends who still to this day, and I think, one of them who came to my wedding mentioned this in one of the speeches of like, I couldn't, there's flat white, there's short. It was my first day. I was still jet lagged. I was trying to order.
You just needed caffeine.
So anything at this point. But I mixed the terms incorrectly and probably said like short white or something. It was wrong. It was made clear that it was wrong. But these days I'm
you
not
still
good
get
at making
grief for it.
I still get grief for it. It's like it's like people pulling your pigtails. It's endearing. It's part of our relationship with this particular friend. But I'm not good at making coffee.
Okay, so how do you drink it now? You said you used to be a black coffee drinker.
Yeah, a splash of milk.
Okay. Are you a drip? Like any specific brew?
I do not have refined enough of a palate around coffee to go beyond that. I am a drip, splash of milk. I will say I did not drink coffee until law school.
I was going to ask.
My brother started drinking coffee when he was a teenager and is addicted. Like, if he does not have his cup of coffee, the headaches come. Okay. The withdrawal is really ugly. I experimented once with this. We were at a retreat together and I was like, oh, your dependency on caffeine seems really unhealthy. Let me swap your regular coffee out for decaf to see if you notice, to help wean you. He noticed.
Everyone noticed.
Everyone noticed. It was not pretty, and I learned that it's a thing. So I really wanted to stay away from coffee because I didn't want to become dependent the way he had. And then there was the law firm, and Keurig was a new thing, and there was like hazelnut, and there was French vanilla, and it just looked so enticing. Appealing. Of course, you have to try it.
Of course.
And I realized I love the feeling of a warm mug of coffee. Like, it's not even the drinking part; it is the holding it,
the smelling it,
That sensation is like home.
So good. I look forward to my morning coffee, to literally hold the cup, set my intention, smell it, and then take my first sip.
Yes. And I
So good.
try really hard when I'm doing the single, we do a single serve pour over, like this, and watching the steam come up. I tell
Mm-hmm.
myself it is like a good meditative pause. I'm sure I could enhance it or like make it more
Keep it a little
purposeful,
longer.
but
Yeah.
I like to think that it's good for me.
Yeah. I mean, look, that works. Whatever works. That's a good start. For sure. So you drink it black with a splash of milk. On my end, we were talking about this before the recording. It's afternoon
Mm-hmm.
for both of us. And so my limit on coffee is 1 p.m. What's
That's
yours?
pretty good. Noon.
Noon?
I should really wean like 11:30.
Yeah, same. But we
Oh
like
yeah.
to live on the edge. So
Yeah.
1 p.m. it
Now,
is.
does iced coffee count as coffee or is it a different category?
Ooh, it depends. Well, iced coffee and cold brew are two
Mm.
different monsters.
Okay.
So cold brew I can't do unless it's like 6 o'clock, and my cutoff for cold brew is like 6:30 because I don't know how people do it. I used to
Mm-hmm.
make 24-hour cold brew, and I think that scarred me for life. Do you know about cold brew? How cold brew is made? It's literally
It,
the beans
yeah,
it's extracted.
sits. Yeah, yeah.
hmm And so it's significantly stronger.
Mm.
So iced coffee, it depends on how many ice you put, I guess. How diluted we're talking. But whatever works. I am that annoying person. I'm not quite a purist. I don't want to call myself a purist. And I am that person that it could be 100 degrees outside. My coffee's going to be warm.
Now,
Mhm.
how do you take yours?
I love a good pour over, and that's black. On my
Okay.
day to day, I do have a drip. I recently ordered a real espresso machine, which I'm so excited. It's not here yet, so I can talk about it
Okay.
yet.
Okay.
But I'm excited for my real lattes. I'll relive my barista life. But my daily thus far is just drip. My mom, I've talked about this for years now, introduced me to powdered milk, but it's like
Mm-hmm.
whole milk.
Mm-hmm. That's what my dad does.
Yeah, it's so
Mm.
good. And so my splash of milk is like powdered milk,
Yeah.
which is
Sugar,
like
no sugar.
no sugar.
Yeah.
Yeah, no sugar.
Mm.
Just good old milky, very
Yeah.
creamy,
Yeah. I
soon to be
can't wait
lattes though.
for tomorrow morning.
I
No.
know. It's so good. And
So
I
good.
will say coffee is a very ritualistic.
Mm-hmm.
It's very much a ritual. Like what you mentioned, like holding the cup and
Yeah.
like seeing the steam, and like that 100% is like
Mm-hmm.
a
Mm-hmm.
pause.
Yeah.
So I support that, even if it's 30
Yeah.
seconds. Hey,
Totally. We
you
will
know.
take them.
All right, let's go back to the show.
Sabrosura pa' ti que que.
So Elaine, you have this career, and your book, Unlearning Silence, it's a combination of personal anecdotes and stories of other people, which I loved.
Mm.
And I mean, I made a lot of notes, but I don't want to spoil it for people. I have like post-its and like highlights,
Hmm.
like so many.
Oh.
But let's talk about, to start, which is how the book begins. There are different definitions of silence.
Mm-hmm.
How does Elaine get to the place to say, I'm no longer going to be quiet? Which I know you've heard about calladita, which I'll tell you about it.
Yes. How did I get to the point where I refuse to be silent? Slowly?
Mm. It's one of those things that you get annoyed.
It was deeper than that. I
Mm.
honestly did not believe that I had a voice.
Even though your mom told you you'd be good at arguing?
Yeah, but that's like talking. And my mom said it. So I probably
Okay.
discounted it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that I didn't have a voice. I think at that point in time, right? High school years, college, all that, I probably believed more that I had something to offer then. It was in the post law school when I went into leadership development, teaching someone else's content. And my job description was literally, I was, it, you know, Organizations can be messy.
Mm-hmm.
Startups can be messy. The job description was you're supposed to be the next this person who is supposed to be the next the name of the founder.
Oh, that
Right? So
messy.
your job is to be the next this person. Your job is not to be you. Your job is not to be the best version of you. Your job is to be mini this person, to amplify and spread their thoughts and ideas. Your face is saying all of it.
Wow. And that was like clearly stated.
That's what was stated. Now, I didn't, being the good little Chinese girl who doesn't push back to elders or people in power,
Right.
I didn't ask for clarification. I could have said, what does that actually mean? Right? What does this role actually entail? I just accepted it because you're supposed to be grateful.
Mm.
Right? I was told
You
you
got a
can't,
job. Yeah.
you can't be in this field unless you have 10 years of experience or are an old white man. And here I was, like, I got the golden ticket. I should be so grateful and let me learn this role well. And I was rewarded for it. I had incredible experiences getting to teach around the world because of someone else's connection and my affiliation with them. What was lost in that was any sense of self,
Mm.
not because they meant to necessarily, although they benefited from it,
Mm.
but I thought that my worth and value came from my ability to mimic someone else.
Ooh.
And so it was not until I started to think, wait, hold on, this whole, like, the advice you're giving me and that I am in turn parroting out to other people, that you should speak up and you should speak up by being more direct. That doesn't work. That's not the whole picture. And I want us to have a more honest conversation about what makes it hard to speak up, what costs there are involved, who gets penalized, the fact that you're saying, we want to hear what you have to say, but then you, in the same breath, let's talk about that,
Mm-hmm.
because that seems more honest. So, but it wasn't until I'm like playing the last couple of years of my life over in my head. It wasn't until Penguin and the other 16 publishers I met with were interested in the book that I thought, wow, I think I'm really onto something here. I went into that process just being like, what do I have to lose? Let me at least see. And then when Penguin signed it, it was oh, I think I'm onto something. And as I shared the ideas and seeing how deeply it resonated with people, oh, I do have something to add here. And I had never written anything of this length before. So I didn't think of myself as an author or a writer because I'd also spent so much time co-writing or ghostwriting for other people,
Mm-hmm.
that it wasn't until I've signed off on the final manuscript and read the book as a reader that I was like, hey, Meg, my editor, Meg, I think I can write. And she's like, no shit, Sherlock. I was like, but I didn't know.
There's so many layers.
There's so many layers.
So you wrote a whole ass book.
I know.
And until you read it, the book that you authored was that you finally heard your own voice.
And I didn't know what my voice sounded like because I'd spent so much time trying to sound like other people, right? I had been given advice of, like, there are people who say any framework that is worth anything needs to be a 2x2, McKinsey style.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, this concept does not fit in a 2x2.
Yes.
And then I was sort of like, F it. There are more ways of existing in the world than a 2x2, and maybe some people will get it. Turns out people do. But yeah, I mean, it really, the meta levels on this, Pam, of this book coming into the world are real. And it's not that I didn't think I had something to offer at that point, because I knew what I was writing was useful. But I didn't know what my voice sounded like until I read it as a reader. I was like, oh, apparently my voice is colloquial or conversational. Apparently I'm going to talk about things like cleaning the toilet.
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be well researched and evidence
Very
based
well
because,
researched.
well, you know why.
Yeah. Yes.
Right? That's a survival mechanism. It's the
Correct.
citations are there because some people won't read it or some people will still read it and question it. So go check your sources.
Yes.
I don't have any beef around that, I promise.
Read
And
the book.
I know, and apparently I talk about Top Chef and Queer Eye and the Golden State Warriors because I'm from California.
Of
Sorry,
course.
not just California, the Bay.
To be specific.
Let's be specific.
And I love that you mention all of this because it makes me even like I'm bringing it back to your mom telling you
Mm,
you can argue because I feel like
mm.
in a way when I was reading the book it was very much an argument,
Yeah.
with evidence. Like it was very lawyerly of you to be like this is what it is and here's the evidence of it. So come at me. Don't question it. So
I love that that came through because I think it is more and more leaning into only we can be ourselves,
mm,
right? So these days I'm thinking a lot about we can be really quite good imitations of other people. And I
mhm.
would say I did that for a long time. Or we can be amazing versions of ourselves. And the fact that you think you interpreted this as a, like, you can see my lawyerliness coming through, even though I never practiced law.
Yes.
Because I have some like imposter syndrome of unfinished business of I went to law school, taught at a law school, never practiced law. I'm therefore not the real thing. And I argue that there's still like training that goes into it. And, you know, it's credibility that opens certain doors because some people aren't going to listen to you unless you checked certain boxes
Totally.
to let it all come full circle and let it be.
Absolutely. And while I do think it's very loyal, I mean, I think I don't know. My grandfather was a lawyer, and
Mm,
so I bring in a lot of, and I grew up with my grandparents,
mm.
and so I bring a lot of elements of like you always want to bring the evidence. And funny enough, lots of my clients are lawyers, which is very fascinating, and so I have always the because of my constant questioning
Yeah.
of like who are you,
Mm.
there's so many things of like I look young, I sound like I am 12 years old, like there's so many things
Do you?
in my
That's a
head I
really
do.
mature, wise 12-year-old.
Maybe 16. Maybe I've
Okay.
grown. But it's still a constant thing. Even like
Ah,
little things of recently I often talk about my ADHD, for example, and even that is fucking questioned. Like did a doctor tell you or are you one of those like thousands of people that are self-diagnosed? And I'm like, well, does it matter to you? Like what does that have to do with anything? And so to bring it back to the
oh.
book and your voice, I think it does have this very lawyerly voice,
Mm,
and it also has, to your point of like queer eye and all of this,
mhm,
it's not, it's approachable and it's friendly and it's something that I
mm,
understand. And it's not
mm,
like, sometimes you read things and you're like, yeah, I need like someone to come and translate this
mhm,
because
mhm.
it's just not like I need a
Yeah.
dictionary.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so while the book does have a lot of statements and facts and it's very well researched, I still think there's, in a very dichotomous way,
Mm,
lots of connections to real life things that we all know.
yeah.
And
That's the
so that's a great voice to have.
thank you. Yeah, it's a complicated voice to have. Even from, is this a business book or a
Mm,
personal development? Where on the shelf is it going to sit?
where?
And I was like, you know what? Not my problem.
Good for you.
Right? There are people in publishing who figure that out. And you know what? It sits at some Barnes and Nobles, it sits in the business section. In some places, it sits in the bestseller section. In some places, it is leadership or personal growth. I don't know, not my issue to sort out. And that actually was part of this. Let me write the book that I think needs to be written
Mm,
rather than fit into the box that people so want us to fit into.
for sure. I love that. What a great way to give yourself permission to just
Mhm.
put whatever you need to put out into the world and
Mhm.
release the box.
Mm. Well, and it's been so funny to be in conversation about it because people are like, "Did you write everything you wanted to say? After all, this is about unlearning silence." I'm like, "No, because I still live in the real world."
Yeah.
And unlearning silence does not mean saying everything everywhere to everyone all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I had two audiences for the book. One were people who, like, I'm going to assume us, who have been silenced. I wanted us to feel seen, known, and heard, right? It wasn't us. It's not because we're crazy or less than or weak. It's this thing called silence, and we are surrounded by it and sometimes internalized it. And the second population is well intentioned leaders
Mm.
who hold power, who genuinely are like, "Tell me what you think. I'm here to support you." Okay. Well, chapter 5, here are the 9 ways that you silence us, even when you don't intend to.
Yeah.
Do something about that.
Yeah.
And you can like eavesdrop in on the stuff we're saying beforehand so you have context. And so you don't go to your employees of color and say, "Hey, explain to me what it's like to be a person of color in America." Right? We've all had that
Yes.
conversation. And in order to reach both audiences, there's a lot of dancing,
Lots of dancing.
weaving.
Yeah.
And I'm aware.
And you just share this question of like, did you write everything? My question is, how hard was it to remove and to keep it concise?
There's a whole editing process.
I know. I know. Interviewed a lot of authors and everyone talks about the pain of that.
Yeah, and actually it wasn't so much substance, it was which examples do I keep.
Mm.
The story is that let me start by saying I have signed a non-disclosure agreement with my former business partners. So, data point. When I started writing this book, I was the first non-white partner at a global leadership development firm. I am no longer a managing partner there. The book was launched after our separation, after my time there ended, because all the meta levels are real.
Mm-hmm.
So the harder editing was, how much do I want to say what I have to say for me? Because my version of the story, our versions of the stories don't always get told. Someone else controls the narrative. And what's going to serve the reader?
Oof.
Does the reader really need to know the real identities of these people? So there were times where I texted a good friend of mine. I'm like, I am sitting on a rock by the water at the marina, negotiating with myself. And I stand behind the choices I made. I think they are wise. I think it accomplishes what the reader needs. And I continue to work out other things in therapy.
For sure. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
And I would probably add like that younger version of you who might be reading this book.
Mm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
they'll hear that story and be like,
Yeah.
that's that perspective.
It's so funny because people say they write the book that they needed when they were younger. And I've been saying I wrote the book that I still need.
Yeah.
I mean, this book has nurtured and guided me as I navigate, as we all do, the forces and the people who want to continue to silence us.
For sure.
And the weight that we carry when we are the only ones who look like us in spaces of, if I burn out, if I'm silenced, if I leave, then what happens? Yeah. And going back to, how do we make the choices that are right for us?
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we leave the space better than we found it, even with the silencing?
I got paid family leave through.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that made a difference. That couldn't fix it all. But on the arc of justice and equity, we're further along than when I first joined. And when is the time to pass the torch
Mm.
or fight different battles in a different way?
There's so much.
There's so much.
I was actually very happy when I found your book, and then it was one of those like when you came like, would you want to interview Elaine? I'm like, oh my gosh, because my work is on calladita culture, and calladita culture are the based thus far. It's changed over time. That's why I think one day I'll write a book on it, and you're gonna be quoted. And I think it's well, thus far is the 5 principles that keep us quiet and underpaid and overworked and overwhelmed. And
Yeah.
so I'm sure this happens to you. I've talked on Galleta culture before. Galleta culture for me is the villain in the story. So in the book, you talk about systems. Galleta culture is a system.
Yeah.
And when I've talked about it, people from all kinds of cultures come back and they're like, well, I might not be Latina.
Yeah.
However, you know, I'm sure that happens to you.
Well, and this was what was I have the Spanish translation here actually.
Yay!
That was what was so wild to me is when I learned about Calladita culture or heard Calladita te vas más bonita.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
we are more, and I always knew this, but I didn't know it in the same depth. We are more connected, we're more alike than we think we are.
Yes.
And that to me is also the call to action, right? How do we see each other, love each other, support each other, nurture each other? You may be Latina, I am Asian American, or I'm figuring out what I am, right? And our like African American and Black sisters, and fill in the blank. We all navigate so much of what is universal and also means we can do a better job of disrupting it for each other.
Totally. And I think more and more it's happening.
Mm.
I think our generation is one that's like, wait a minute, doesn't matter what you look like,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter like what your last name is,
Yeah.
just because like we have this little extra melanin in our skin, and I'm not, and even the assumptions that happen, like being able to witness those and seeing each other and saying, and I don't know if it's happened to you maybe when you were in corporate. What used to happen to me was the looks that you give, and you're like, ooh, I noticed that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other person looks at you and they're like, did you feel it too?
It's so validating.
I know.
It's so validating and so powerful. We don't even need words,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's just
Mm-hmm.
and like you see me. I'm not crazy. I didn't make that up. You saw it. You felt it. Witness.
Yes.
And what are we gonna do about it?
And what are we going to do about it? How are we going to leave the place better than we found it,
Mm-hmm.
even with the silencing?
Mm-hmm.
So we're running out of time. Tell us all the places and spaces where we can find you. Tell us where we can get the book. Everything.
Yeah. You can find me on LinkedIn, most predominantly. I am woefully underpresent on Instagram, but if you want to hang out there, I'm game too. I have a monthly newsletter that goes straight to your inbox that your manager cannot see.
Yay.
So you can find that and a place to sign up on my website, ElaineLinHering.com. The book is available wherever books are available. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, Walmart, or your favorite indie in hardback, paperback, large print, audio, ebook. I narrate the audiobook, so if you are sick of the sound of my voice already, consider yourself forewarned. And then available in Spanish, and the Portuguese version comes out in 10 days.
How fun.
German, Thai. It's brewing. It's happening.
How fun.
And so the hope, though, right, is not the translations. The hope is a world in which we get to be who we are, in which we are seen, known, heard, celebrated, and that belonging, dignity, and justice are true for every human being rather than just a privileged few.
Yes.
And that's the world I keep working toward, the world I know you keep working toward, and that we can build together.
I love it. How exciting. What's next for you?
It's an interesting place to be because I was on the hamster wheel, the escalator, conveyor belt, whatever it is, and stepping away from the firm, from, I made it.
Yeah.
Here are the air quotes there. It was partner.
On paper, like it says in the book.
Yes, there was paperwork.
She said, on paper, I was partner.
Oh, yeah, that's a separate conversation. I got to teach at Harvard Law School, and that opens doors. But I think what's next is really just being open to what does this. I'm technically a solopreneur now. I continue to speak and teach on Unlearning Silence. I don't think that work is going away. So I'm always happy to be in conversation. And I am enjoying really trying to listen to what do I need in this season? What do I want? What a novel idea. And what might a life that is meaningful and fulfilling actually look like, rather than the things that I was told would be meaningful or fulfilling, or just that wasn't even part of the metric.
Ooh.
So what's next is listening and being open to all the conversations and opportunities that I don't even know about yet, which is the beautiful part.
Possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
Yay. How exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, last few questions. I can keep asking questions, but last few questions. Do you have a core or mantra that you live by right now?
Apparently not. Because if I had one, it would come to mind really quickly, right?
Yeah.
Now add that to my to-do list.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe maybe it's silence in your head. Maybe it's the pause in your morning coffee.
I think the mantra is actually this prompt of what do I need? That question that I didn't ask or answer for so many years. Yeah. And that is maybe not so much a mantra, but serves as a guiding question.
For sure.
And to actually listen.
Ooh, so deep. Do you have a remedy you want to share with us?
Sleep.
I'm behind that.
We're going baseline here.
Yes.
I have a 6.5-year-old who did not sleep through the night until he was 3.5, and now we are in night terrors again. So sleep solves so many things, or at least increases our capacity to deal with so many things.
Yeah.
Sleep. I wish sleep and deep soul rest for everyone.
I hope you get some good sleep tonight.
Thank you. That's why I cut myself off from the coffee.
I support that. And do you have a productivity tip, trick, or tool that you want to share with us?
Not pushing through anymore.
Ooh, love that.
Took me a long time to learn that when step away, take the break, breathe, stretch, it actually makes you more productive.
I concur with that so much. And it makes me think of a conversation that I had recently with someone who was talking about their shame about decisions. And once we talked it through, she realized that the shame came from not pausing to decide. So the shame was actually feeding of the quote overreacting, or the decision that happened from a dysregulated place. And so talking about baseline, getting yourself back to, and having the awareness, of saying, this is one thing that can wait.
Yeah. And I wouldn't blame this person. That's how the world around us is working,
Right.
right?
So the fast-paced expectations,
Yeah,
the immediate gratification. You need answers immediately,
you don't
right? Let's get back to human
really.
pace
Yes,
for sure.
yes.
Well, Elaine, thank you so much for coming to Cafe Con Pam. We could stay here and keep talking and peeling the layers, but definitely everyone read Unlearning Silence is a must. I would give it to you for homework, listeners. So you can, there's so much. I almost, I didn't open the book to ask questions because I have so many
Mm,
highlights and we would have like
mm.
spent the whole hour in those. So for listeners, and the other thing that you offer, which is great, is you offer a guide and discussion questions.
I do. Yeah. So anyone who wants to be reading, processing in community, there's some support there in guided questions. But I hope folks have the same experience I have, and I know you have, which is it's not just you,
Yeah.
right? If you are feeling isolated, you're feeling like you're the problem, it's actually not just you.
Mm-hmm.
So come join us, whether we are misfits or norm or whatever. It's not you. And the more that we're able to talk about it, the more we realize that we are connected. We are not dealing with that social isolation and loneliness. Right? I talk about it as double pain in the book of we can't solve the diagnosis or the job loss, but we can solve for the double pain, which is that isolation of thinking you're the only one navigating it.
Mm,
And that it really does make a difference
big
to
time.
be in it together.
Totally.
Thanks for having me.
Sabrosura pa' ti que que.
All right, listeners, I hope you enjoyed our conversation. I think I said it at the beginning, and I think there's more to this conversation. Definitely get yourself the book. It's a good, you'll see my notes and all my foldings and pages and whatnot. But the other thing that I mentioned in the intro is that it's an easy read. So you'll hear me say this in the episode, or you heard me say this in the interview, that while it's well researched, it's still also very familiar. It's not one of those like highly academic books that you need to have a thesaurus or a dictionary next to you. One of those books that pushes buttons that you're like, oh, that's something that needed to be said. And so I really enjoy it. Iguana listeners, if this is your first time here, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to Cafe Con Pam. I hope you feel at home. Sit back and relax. Bring back your cafecito. Make sure you subscribe. Leaving a rating and a review is so important. It's a great way, an easy way to support the show. If you're watching this on YouTube, this is a great time to subscribe, hit the bell, leave a comment, share the video with whoever you think will benefit from it, because it helps a ton as we are looking to reach, or to increase our reach and share our stories more. I think we're turning 8, and we need our stories to be shared into the world. And they're your stories, and they're the stories of people like you and me. And so let's do this together. And I couldn't do it without you. So here I am asking you for that relatively easy support. And thank you for being here, first and foremost. Y bueno, I would love to stay connected at Cafe Con Pam Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. cafeconpam.com is where you can find not just the episode notes for Elaine's story like this one, but also other stories, other amazing stories of other incredible people. You can also read them, because now we are writing stories via the pour over, which is it's articles basically. So we started writing stories because there's so many of us, and I can only do one podcast a week. And so through the pour over, we are sharing stories in the written form. And here on YouTube, if you're watching on YouTube, we are doing YouTube exclusives where my goal is to do more and more in-person stuff. We are starting, of course, with the city that I live in San Diego, and I'm visiting coffee shop owners. I am hanging out with people in person and posting those interviews in the YouTube channel. I'm also doing activities like volunteering. You've seen a couple of videos for the Chicano Federation because I think it's another form of writing what we do and creating story and writing history. That's what I was meaning to say. Pero bueno, listeners, thank you so much for being here today. Y bueno, como siempre, stay shining.
Sabrosura pa' ti que